All right, so welcome back to the Therapists Deserve Abundance podcast, everybody. This episode I know is going to hit more than therapists. It's going to hit entrepreneurs, because I know that I'm not the only one who has given into saying yes to something out of FOMO, out of scarcity, out of a poverty mindset. But sometimes we don't see that we have that mindset while we're actually in the situation. Okay. And so, again, this is part of my series on the road to my first million. And I said my first because there's going to be plenty more. But I did this series last year, and it was 10 lessons learned in private practice going into my 10-year celebration in July. So y'all gonna be hearing this a lot earlier. It'll publish on the podcast probably the first week of July, because this is number 4. So really excited. So I'm just gonna read like my intro, and then I'm gonna talk to y'all, right? So the recap in the beginning of this episode is I learned, looking back, that I was saying yes to my scarcity mindset and going back to that job that I left, that I had no business going back to. So for those of y'all who don't know the backstory, I ain't gonna share the whole thing of why I really left the 6-figure job. But let's just say when I left, I had already been in my season of having a solo practice. I had already in that season had a full thriving group practice with 5 clinicians at that time, working in the company during veteran assessments and doing groups and doing mental health therapy. And then I was also doing therapy, but I was also the administrator, the HR person. Like, I wore a lot of hats. That's why I teach all of that in either DTA or the mastermind program, right? Like, don't wear all the hats over time, but maybe you need to learn them in the beginning. I realized that I was in a peak season in my life, and I'll tell y'all what happened. And I made the decision to go back to this job. So one of the bigger reasons why I even left this job was because, the pay was good, but looking back, clearly I was overworked and to me, underpaid, because I'm not looking at how much they were getting paid for the work that we were getting paid and we would get a reimbursement, but I'm just looking at how they treated you, like even the customer service to the therapists who are going out doing all this epic work, especially for me in the jail, you know what I'm saying? Like, it wasn't it. And so what I end up doing is making the call and leaving the job. Now, my due date to leave happened about 6 months before I anticipated it. I did have a savings account, but I ended up having a panic attack, and it didn't start with a panic attack. It started with me locking myself in my office on the 3rd week at this particular site, because you can move around different jails. I had went from a camp, which I really loved, but I got tired of the drive, 2 hours to 2 hours from, in LA traffic, not ideal, which means that I woke up when it was dark. I got home when it was dark. I worked 4 days, 10-hour shifts. And on those opposite days, your girl was a hustler back then. I was working in teaching facilities like colleges, and also learning how to run a private practice. So your girl was busy. All gas, no brakes. Not ideal. Not saying do that. And so moving forward, I started recognizing that when I transferred to the juvenile hall, the management is what I didn't like. It's not my supervisor, but like management. So I started to recognize on the 3rd week that definitely something was wrong when I'm sitting in the office and I'm like crying. And I don't know who to call, because my mom don't know how to validate me. All my other friends at their job, maybe that they like or something like that. And I'm like, here I am as an entrepreneur, but I'm at this job and I'm crying. Why am I crying? I'm literally, it's like a balloon burst or a volcano erupts. I can't explain it, but I started crying. And so my office was a jail cell. Some of y'all have heard that story. And I beautified it in Target. But nevertheless, I love the work that I did with the kids. And I had always told myself, if I ever left, which I plan on leaving, but when the day that I leave, I want to be able to give back in the way that I'm doing in the jail. I just want to be able to do it my own way. Like, I don't want y'all to tell me what to do, because y'all rules like suck to the point where we would have to request time off. We would have to request to go to CEs that they promised us. And then we would have to choose which CE workshop we were going to do. We would have to work on the holidays because jails don't close, right? So I had kind of had a due date in my mind. I made a 9-to-5 exit plan before I even knew what that was. I looked up some videos about how to calculate my expenses and then times it by taxes and then inflate it because there's self-employment taxes. So I did all those things, and I realized that even though the job with overtime was paying $130,000, Base pay was $99,000. I was at level 5, which is the highest level at that job, 1 through 5. You go up the longer you are there, plus licensure. So I was at the max, which means that I just automatically get a raise. But outside of becoming like a program head of a department, like that's it. and maybe stretching me this way to have more responsibility. So over time, being in that certain setting, I started to recognize that I was stressed. But I don't want to acknowledge that I was stressed. And just, if you understand cultural diversity, if you don't, I'm about to school you right now. Black, brown, Asian, and Indian people, as a folk, right? We tend to somaticize our symptoms, meaning you will swear up and down you're not stressed, but it's a whole lot going on in your life because you got a high tolerance for stress. You'll say you're not stressed, but you're stressed, right? So I started experiencing tension headaches. Went to the doctor twice, 2 months apart from each other. This is all before I had the panic attack. And they said, you're stressed. And I'm like, no, it's not. I love my life. I'm traveling. I'm good. I got a nice car. About to, just moved into a house. Like, I'm like, I'm gravy. And they were like, ain't nothing wrong with you. So I was like, huh. Now, they knew that I was a psychologist. And I'm just wondering why they never maybe, because when you're in it, right? And I just wish that the doctor would have said, like, have you talked to somebody? Even that question probably would have opened me up to like think about something else. So they gave me some Motrin, sent me on my way. And I'm like, oh, this is trash. So my tension headaches, I started doing like onset, duration, and frequency. If you're a therapist, you know what I'm talking about, or if you're a medical provider. What is the onset of the symptom? What is the duration? How long does it last? And what is the frequency? How often it come up? So I started doing it with myself, and I started recognizing a pattern. Data tells you everything. And the data was saying every time I decided to go to work that day, my headache will come. Like as I'm putting on my clothes, my headache will come. When I get in the car, it's getting stronger and stronger. Then over a few weeks, it led into having to pull over on the way to the juvenile hall, TMI, vomit. I ain't pregnant. I tested everything. Ain't nothing happening. So I'm like, why am I having these symptoms? Went back to the doctor. They said, are you stressed? And I said, I don't like my job, but I'm good. And they were like, well, maybe you are stressed. But again, never triggered to like now, like, hey, maybe you should go talk to somebody. So went back to the job. So 2 months, tension headaches, vomiting probably once a week on my way to work. What I would do to maintain myself or contain myself is lock myself in an office, do my work, see my kids, talk to probation, talk to the kids. I didn't talk to mental health providers like that because they were also stressed out and I didn't want their negative energy to make me feel worse. So I stayed to myself. All right. And that's sometimes what you have to do as your coping mechanism if you're in a toxic environment. So that's how I was able to survive. However, one day I wake up on a Saturday out of nowhere, 4:00 in the morning. I'm supposed to go in at 8:00 on call. You would have thought that somebody passed away in my family. Like that's really close because the way I was crying, my husband now, but back then it was my fiance. He couldn't even, he thought I got a bad phone call. 4:00 in the morning. It's almost like I had a bad dream, sat up really quickly, didn't want to wake him up, ran downstairs because it's almost like you can feel the volcano erupting. And then I just start crying. I guess he heard me. He came down. And this is how desperate I was. I called Kaiser. They didn't have nothing available. I'm like, go figure. Then and they did a little intake, asked me all these like 5150 questions. I'm like, I ain't none of that. I just know now I clearly am stressed at my job. I can acknowledge that now, so they were like, we can get you into a group, blah, blah, blah. I said, well, let's schedule the intake. But in the meantime, let me call my EAP. So I called my EAP. It's a Saturday. Ain't nobody answering. Ain't nobody calling me back. I'm like, oh my God. So I end up getting like a fast. I kept calling back. I ended up getting a fast appointment with Kaiser. I think I went like Wednesday or something. Now, crazy thing, working out, doing some crazy moves, sprained my ankle. So while I'm there and I had the sprained ankle, I actually asked for a more updated appointment. Like I'm about to be off work anyway, go ahead and squeeze me in. So that's how I got in so fast. So when I was at, the doctor, they did the whole, intake or whatnot. They diagnosed me with a panic attack. It only happened twice in my life at that time. It happened like 3 times in total though. But definitely like adjustment disorder with anxiety, with a little bit depressed mood. I had mixed, just being fully transparent. I don't think I ever disclosed that on the any podcast episode. And so the therapist knew where I had worked. He used to work there, and he said, I probably would have had a panic attack too. We actually left when the person who you're saying is causing the toxicity. A lot of us left when that person came. And I'm like, word, y'all should have had a memo, And so he understood it, and he said, I can take you off work for a week at max. I said, can I get longer? I'm going to ask. And he said, not unless you go to psychiatry. And I'm like, well, no, I think I'll be pretty good with talk therapy. I'll just go to the group therapy session. And he said, once you go to group therapy, you can also call this number and get a one-on-one therapist. So I did all the things related to mental health. Went to the group. It was great. Gave me some mindset tools and all that stuff. Fast forward. 3 days later, it was time for me to go back to work. I said, hell to the no. Like, if this is how I'm feeling, sitting up, elevating my foot on a sprained ankle, and I ain't had no panic attacks, no vomiting, no tension headaches, and I've been chilling at my house on my bed and on my couch, and just like talking to the clinicians in my private practice saying, y'all got it, you need to hop on Zoom. I can drive to the office with a sprained ankle, but I just can't do much. You know what I'm saying? They were like, no, we good. Because I had another clinical supervisor. And so I said, damn, I can like really run my business from home. Now think about this, where we at now, right? This is crazy how all these things were happening in a synchronous way. And this was in 2000. I left in 2015. Now, please note, I was also planning this big extravagant Hollywood wedding. Still had to pay for 85% of the wedding. Didn't know where that money was going to come from. Don't worry about the how. So now let me take you to the point where there was a transition, and I was focusing more on what I don't have and creating anxiety about something that did not happen ever. As a matter of fact, yet. I'm going to say yet. And I created a narrative in my mind to do something that I should have never done. So what ended up happening is, while I was getting married, I'm in a blended family. My husband had a son, or has a son, and he's 5 years old at the time of us getting married. I met him at like four. And so he's 5 going on 6 at this time. And I just started to like look into the future, being the visionary that I am. And I'm like, oh my God, when we have a child, will I have enough money? We got a mortgage, which is fine. We got car notes, we gravy. But when I look at just clearly how much it costs to care for a child plus my lifestyle, I'm like, I don't know if this is enough, because this is cool what I got with me being able to stack up money for myself. This doesn't count a baby, right? And babies can be a little expensive if we gotta do daycare and stuff. So I'm thinking about all the things, and I ain't have a child for like 3 years, right? So that got me into a state of anxiety. That led me, because what I was getting to with the being at home earlier is that on the 7th day, the hell to the gnaw, I end up emailing and faxing the office saying I ain't coming back. There was no 2-week notice. Y'all got this 2-week notice when I was sitting here having tension headaches every single day and telling my supervisor that I think something is happening with my mental health. And he was like, take care of yourself, X, Y, and Z. Even told me the CE workshop I need to go to is stress and burnout. And the fact that my supervisor told me to go to that one, I'm like, you stressed too, So what ended up happening, I left the county job, had my wedding, life was lifing. Private practice was popping. Group practice was fire. Teaching at 3 schools, having ideas, learning how to launch digital products. Like all the things that I could ever dream of was happening. And then all of a sudden I allowed this narrative to take over and dictate my next move. Let me know if that sounds familiar to you. And so I decided to do my homework and see, how do I go back to the county? Because I don't want to go back to a mundane job, but I would prefer to do part-time. But if I go to the right program, I can low-key have flexibility with my schedule. So I knew which program to go back into. When I came in, they told me that I would more than likely be at stage 2. If I can raise some red flags right now on this podcast, okay? Never sign up for something until you get the final paperwork. So they said, go ahead and sign this agreement that you're going to come in on level 2, but you can still talk to the supervisor, which I had, and talk to the department. And they said, more than likely, we're going to be able to move you back because you only been gone less than 6 months. No, I was going a little over 6 months, but that was actually the problem. Over 6 months, they have to take you to the level as though you're a new person, but licensed, which was level 2. When I left, I had that 5-year stint or 4.5 year of experience. So it was 4.5, right? And so you're welcome. And so, what ended up happening? So I ended up signing on the dotted line. I went back and I knew something was wrong when they put me in a cubicle downtown LA in the program that I wanted to be in. But I love to go out to the camps. I don't care how far the drive is. I don't like driving to work, like just in traffic, but I like driving to kids' homes, schools. I just like to interact and be out in the community because I feel like I'm making like a different level of impact, which is why I do what I do now, even with like nonprofits and stuff or church or whatnot. So what I end up doing is going back, signing up for it, being placed in a cubicle, and nobody was watching me. Now, not to say that I want micromanagement, but the fact that nobody checked on me all day, I ain't even saying for clock in and clock out, but ask me, do I need help? My paperwork was lost. All of these things were happening to show me I should have never came back, right? So one day I decided to leave. And I knew something was also wrong because I never decorated my space. Now, if you see my office, I was decorating the jail cell like this. It was blue though for boys, you know, but my office had like, my cubicle had, the first go round had like vision boards everywhere. When I was in the process of buying a home, I had vision boards. And I also like to pick things that would inspire these kids or adults that I was working with to like dream bigger outside of having a conviction, you know, or expunge a record if you're a child. And so I didn't decorate any of that. I didn't bring nothing to the job. So one day I just decided, let's bet on me. You got a group practice. Your group practice is making well over 6 figures. You making 6 figures just with what you combing in through all these streams of income. Why are you sitting here? Why are you scared? Am I talking to you right now? You know what I'm saying? Like, why are you scared? And so I'm like, you right. And so what I end up doing is I cleaned up the little folder that I had. I got in my car. I drove around the corner to HR because we're in a different building. It's LA County Department of Mental Health. So they have like different sites. So I drove around to HR. I had some conversations with people in between and giving me false promises about giving me the money that I deserve, giving me a $20,000 pay cut. Just put some numbers on it, right? So I'm like, I'm tired of it. And somebody even told me with the paper trail that they were able to find, there was no reason why I was still at the rate that I was at. And I said, well, hell, it's been 3 weeks. So if y'all keep giving me false promises, like at some point, I'm not going to believe you. And I told the guy that, and he was like, I don't blame you. He told me to close the door. Like, I don't blame you, but you didn't hear this from me kind of thing. So I went downtown and I requested to speak to the lady who had been ignoring my phone calls for the whole 2 to 3 weeks. She ain't in the office. I leave 4 to 5 voicemails. I'm hella thorough with my voicemails. Sending emails, no response, which made me go talk to the gentleman. And he was like, you should just go around there. But literally, he knew I was going around there with this badge to give them their damn badge back. So in the hallway, she meets me and I'm like, oh, you here? You know, and I'm smiling. I'm like cordial. And she was like, you know, what's the concern? And I said, oh, here's my badge. And she was like, your badge, are you quitting? I said, yes. And she said, oh, when do you want to be your last day? I said, today, right now. And at that point, my whole mood changed. And so she was like, oh, let's, discuss. And I said, you want to have this conversation out in the lobby in public? And that already told me her level of integrity was trash. Right? So I said, I'm not going to talk about finances in a lobby. Right? So we end up going back to like a conference room. I end up explaining to her everything that I did, every voicemail that I left, every email that I sent. And I said, I did not once hear from you when the office was saying that you were back from vacation. And I even talked to other people in admin and they told me that you're the only one that I can technically talk to. So then she puts the blame on me, which as a business owner, I'm gonna take 50% responsibility. I should have never taken a job knowing that it was not guaranteed that I would get the amount of money. And she said, well, you did sign saying that, there wasn't a 100% guarantee that you would get that money. I said, but that's not what y'all told me when you hired me, but you're right. So that's why today is my last day. And she said, are you serious? I said, I wanted to say dead ass, but my face said it. And I said, yes. Here's my badge. And she was like, do you want to talk to your supervisor? Nah, I emailed them in a car. I ain't even told them yet. Hell, they ain't checked on me anyway. You know what I'm saying? They left me in a cubicle for 3 weeks. And just to let you know also how you know that things are conspiring for you in this universe, they lost my paperwork. Therefore, I couldn't even get on a computer. I couldn't even get on a computer to log into the internet, So why am I sharing this with you? I solely made the decision to go back to my job because I had personal development at that time. but I wasn't willing to go all in and bet on myself. I'm also sharing this with you is every single moment that you wait to up level your mindset, your finances, your spirituality, your health, your relationships, whatever component of your life that you're working in or on, the longer you wait to pull the trigger and say yes and not focus on the how and not allow your anxiety, limiting belief, thoughts of stuff that ain't happened, you ain't got no proof that it's gonna happen, it has never happened in your history. If you allow that narrative to overcome you, you're going to continue to be at the place or level in your business, your mindset, and in your bank account that you are in right now. And that's the whole gist of this series is like, it has not been a long journey. And even though I may hyper focus on this 11 lessons that I've learned on my way to my first million, I'm giving you examples of things that came well before I built my coaching business. Everything that you've been exposed to your whole life is embedded in your brain unless you learn how to get rid of it and replace it with more abundant thinking, and things. And so I had to learn after I left that I will never allow this experience to happen again because I don't like the way that I feel about myself. I'm no longer going to blame like, oh, the job. The job did what the job do, right? I loved what I do at my job. And I always like to make that clear because some people assume, oh, you don't like your job. No. I liked my job, my role with serving the reentry population coming out of the juvenile facilities. And I loved working, honestly, in the camps and in the halls. I loved those population. I still love serving that population. But what I will not settle for is working under somebody who doesn't appreciate how we show up in the jail, get out there dressing casual, try to do what we do, and then you're not even willing to go to bat for me because you know my value, but then you ask me why I'm leaving. Trash. Get up out of here. Right? So I've learned over time and time again, because I wanted my last time, but I'm not going to go into that on this episode. But that was like one of my biggest lessons because I did not trust myself. And I allowed all these negative thoughts to enter into my abundance zone and pretty much take over and dictate what was about to happen. And so that 43 days, who knows what would have happened in my group practice if I would have just stayed there for those extra 43 days. I continue to run my group practice clearly. But again, I just want to leave you with this. Take action. Okay. Learn how to say yes to you. Learn how to say no to like limiting thoughts. So like a therapy technique that I used to teach my transitional age youth, like 16 to 25. A lot of them had anxiety and I had to just talk straight up with them, but not use too much mental health language, right? So I would ask the kids, do you know what a lease is? And they like a house? And I'm like, yeah, like you lease an apartment, And I was like, yeah. I said, what happens when a lease is up? They like, oh, I gotta go or I gotta renew. I'm like, okay, so the lease, you're taking up room or space like in that time, right? So I said, what I want you to do, and I remember telling it to this little boy, and he was like 17, but I remember like after our treatment or when he would like leave and come back, he'll be like, I always remember what you told me. He was having issues at his job at fast food where he was doing his job, but other people were toxic. They were trying to pull him into the toxicity conversations. Because he didn't want to get into those conversations with them, they start talking about him, that kind of little petty stuff. So I said, this is what we're going to do. Every time you're about to go to work, I need you to tell yourself the following. I will not allow your negative vibe, energy, or statements, or however you want to say it, entertain and leave space in my brain. Because what's happening is they're changing your brain chemistry, son. What's happening is these people are pushing you into more anxiety. More anxiety for certain people's mental health can push them over the edge. And for that particular client, he had already had some serious things happen 2 years prior in which he had a drastic like change because he was adhering to his treatment and his psychiatry and all those things. Right. So I'm like, oh no, like I'm kind of like a surrogate parent sometimes. Like we didn't do all this work for us to go backward. Like absolutely not. Cause that 2 year stint, I worked on for a long time. That little 2 year stint that you and your family and psychiatry had to do to like get you back up to par. We ain't about to let no fast food restaurant employee taint this journey. You know what I'm saying? And that's how I feel. Not talking down about my counterparts, but I'm not about to let no disgruntled employee mess up my vibe at a job so that I can go and take it out on my employees at my group practice? Hell no, I got to go. Because if I feel like your energy is even coming in my car, like you got too close. So I really hope that you've enjoyed this episode. Let me just do the shout out. If you are listening on the podcast later, make sure that you subscribe or follow the podcast and get into the DMs. Tell me what was your biggest takeaway. If you are watching this on YouTube, drop in the comment box. Make sure you subscribe and leave me your biggest takeaway. If you ain't follow me on YouTube, you know what I'm saying, go to Dr. TK and follow me over there. And that's it.